Part 49. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 481. Baghdad, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Iraq. The civil servant of the Chinese embassy and Zhao Yun were having a heated argument with the Iraqi Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Deputy Chief, if all the entrepreneurs in Yangchuan City are killed in the capital of Iraq this time, and the news spreads, no capital in the world will dare to come to Iraq. Zhao Yun knocked on the table heavily. Mr. Zhao, please calm down. There is no news of Mr. Su's murder so far, said the Iraqi Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. The civil servant of the Chinese embassy raised his eyes and said calmly, if you wait until the news comes, I'm afraid it will be too late. Mr. Deputy Minister, the ambassador has reported the kidnapping of our citizens to our country's senior officials. The reason why it is caused by I am negotiating with you, rather than the ambassador directly going to your president or foreign minister, just to minimize the impact. Thank you for your kindness, the deputy chief nodded. We hope that this gratitude can be implemented into actual actions, and it must be implemented into actions, the civilian said. China insists on not interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. The incident happened on the soil of Iraq, so we did not express gratitude to the Chinese soldiers in the peacekeeping force. Issue an order to resolve it by force. The deputy director was very worried. The Russians had come to him this morning. The polar bear's attitude was not so gentle. Although the Chinese government's attitude seemed to be mild, in other battlefields of business negotiations, it had used this kidnapping case to swallow up a big piece of fat. Your country can rest assured that Mr. President has also learned about this matter. We have dispatched the nearest battalion stationed in the Zagros Mountains to march towards the settlement of the Luo people. The deputy minister showed a confident smile. Please believe that the Luo people support the government and this matter should be resolved peacefully. I hope so. The civil servant and Zhao Yun looked at each other and stood up at the same time. Then we say goodbye. I hope we can see Mr. Su and Miss Ludmila standing here safely as soon as possible. Oh, we and Russia Moran International has reached an agreement that as soon as possible refers to within 72 hours. The deputy minister's face twitched. A weak country has no diplomacy. This saying can be used in any era. What the other party said did not conform to diplomatic rhetoric at all. It was simply an order to the Iraqi government. Those hateful Luo people have provided less than 3 companies of troops to the government in recent years, but they have caused such a big diplomatic trouble for the government. What on earth are they going to do? Damn it, why are you Yanks here? The mercenary captain of Moran International glared at the 5 U.S. Marines in front of him. Not long after entering the Zagros Mountains, the mercenaries of Moran International encountered the group of American soldiers who had retreated from the mountains in the jungle. Both sides were in a state of high mental stress and invariably regarded each other as the enemy. There was a brief exchange of fire. Fortunately, he quickly recognized that the other party was not an IS person, and there was no accidental injury. However, these 5 American soldiers seemed to have experienced a fierce battle before they encountered Moran International. 2 of them had blood stains on their chests and abdomens, and one of them injured his leg. He could only walk with the help of his comrades. To hear. It's not like those reporters who are like flies. The leader of the Marine Corps spit on the ground viciously. 2 reporters from National Geographic magazine secretly entered the IS country and were kidnapped. The other party fired a shot at the government. With a ransom of $100 million, we were ordered to come to the rescue, but we were ambushed by IS as soon as we entered Zagros. IS, Moran's leader was slightly stunned. When did IS territory of influence cover the Zagros Mountains? This should be the traditional territory of the Luo people. How the hell do I know? Those stupid pigs in the Pentagon Intelligence Department, since the beginning of World War II, have killed more of our own people due to the wrong intelligence they provided than those killed by Hitler and others. The rescue failed. We must return to Baghdad. The leader of the Marine Corps cursed, supported his injured comrade, and staggered out. Is has occupied this mountainous area. The captain of Moran International looked at the jungle in the distance and frowned. They are here to save people and do not want to have a real conflict with the Iraqis. No matter what they say, the Lur people are under the rule of government forces. It is reasonable to say that if there is in the front. Hey, brother, I suggest that no matter what you want to do, you'd better give up your thoughts. There is at least one regiment ahead, and maybe more as militants have blocked the way into the mountain. The leader of the Marine Corps turned around and gave a kind reminder. Oh damn, a regiment of is. Upon hearing this, Moran's captain completely gave up the idea of rescuing people. 12 mercenaries broke through a regiment's blockade and went deep into the mountainous area. That was not saving people, it was sending death. Ludmila, I hope God bless you, the captain sighed in his heart. The mercenary was very open-minded about life and death. Since there was no way to rescue him, there was no need to force him. He turned around and waved his hand, leading his soldiers to catch up. Killed the 5 American soldiers. Hey, brother, our car is parked at the bottom of the mountain. There are medicines and wine in the car. Let's go back together and give you a ride. With wine, I think I can survive. A wounded soldier raised his head with difficulty and smiled at the captain. This is like a man. Brother, hold on, Captain Moran patted the injured soldier on the shoulder. The small troops from the 2 countries joined forces, retreated from the mountains, and drove back to Baghdad. Halfway through the journey, they saw a large number of Iraqi regular troops following the main road, heading in the opposite direction of the Zagros Mountains. Did the Iraqi government send troops to rescue people? Moran and the American soldiers thought at the same time. Moran's mercenaries thought that the soldiers were going to rescue Ludmila and Suming. The American soldiers thought they were going to rescue 2 journalists from their country. In a cave in the Zagros Mountains, a white man with his hands tied behind his back and a large eye mask on his eyes whispered, "Miss Nikki, I'm really sorry that my stubbornness has brought you misfortune." Opposite him was Nikki, the black female editor of National Geographic magazine. Nikki was also dressed in the same way and was tied up like a dumpling. Outside the cave, several IS militants were patrolling back and forth. After being kidnapped, Nikki felt the benefits of racial discrimination for the first time in her life. These Islamic terrorists actually thought that black women were dirty and like animals, so they did not violently assault her, and even did not lock her up in an underground cage like those sex slaves, but locked her up in a cave as a hostage. Tom, I can't blame you. I followed you because I wanted to get rid of the boring secretary's job and wanted to become a reporter. God bless, the US Army will rescue us, I firmly believe it, Nikki said, trying to suppress her fear. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 482. Where's the fish? Where's the fish? Where's my fish? I want it alive. In the big house in the center of the village, Su Ming kept shouting for fish. The 2 soldiers guarding the door were both angry and amused, thinking that the high priest's guest was really strange. Why must he eat fish, and it must be alive? The high priest seemed to value this guest very much. Except for not letting him leave the room, all his requirements were met as much as possible. Brother Amir even took a few people to catch fish in the nearby river. Since is issued the final surrender deadline to the tribe, the nearby mountains have become less safe. From time to time, IS armed forces appear, vaguely exerting pressure on the tribe. The guards around the tribe have been strengthened. I hope that the God of Fire will bless Brother Amir and he can come back smoothly. The guarding soldiers were very distressed when they thought of IS. If they don't surrender, the other side will definitely not let the Lo people go. According to the IS usual style, the entire tribe will not survive, but if they surrender, the result will not be much better. It's just the difference between early death and late death. I heard the high priest and brother Basil and Amir say behind their backs that the man inside is the apostle of the god of fire and will lead us out of the predicament. A guard pointed at the wooden house behind him. Him. Humph, I don't believe it. Another guard pursed his lips in disdain. How could the messenger of the god of fire be a greedy Oriental? Where's the fish? Why haven't the fish arrived yet? Su Ming's voice came from the house again. The two guards looked at each other and sighed heavily at the same time. The Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iraq put down the phone in his hand, feeling depressed. It's really one wave after another. The Russian female mercenaries and Chinese businessmen are still missing, and the Americans are in trouble again. Just now, the minister brought another breathtaking news. 2 reporters from the National Geographic magazine infiltrated the IS-occupied area, but were captured by IS before they went deep into it. They were taken hostage and asked the US government for a ransom of $100 million. The US ambassador seemed to be particularly angry today. He ignored diplomatic etiquette and scolded the minister and several senior government officials on the phone, demanding that the Iraqi government solve the problem as soon as possible. The minister scolded the deputy minister on the phone again. The Americans have found out the approximate range where IS holds the journalists hostages. It is in the Zagros Mountains, within a radius of 100 kilometers from the La settlement. In view of the fact that the military has been contacted before and a battalion of regular troops has been sent to the La territory to negotiate the rescue of Ludmila and Su Ming, the government decided to merge the two things into one and solve them together. After rescuing the Oriental Russians, this battalion will go deep into the mountains to search and rescue American journalists. The deputy minister thought about it and called the secretary to let him contact the battalion that was sent out and report the progress of the rescue work at any time. Not long after, the secretary walked into the office with a nervous look, and whispered a few words to the deputy minister. After listening to this, the deputy minister almost jumped up from his chair and shouted, "What? That battalion was wiped out by IS? Why would a large IS force appear near the La settlement area? Sir, the La people asked the government for help half a month ago. IS asked them to surrender and station troops in the Zagros Mountains. But the government has never taken it seriously," the secretary whispered. The deputy minister quickly calmed down from the shock. Being able to wipe out a battalion in a short time, even if the combat effectiveness of this battalion is second-rate in the government army sequence, it means that the other party is definitely not a small force. In other words, IS may have sent a large force into the Zagros Mountains. They were originally preparing to force the La people to surrender, and they happened to meet the battalion that went to rescue people. So, whether it is the American journalists, or the Oriental businessmen and Russian mercenaries, they may have fallen into the hands of the IS force, the deputy minister analyzed. Sir, we can't be sure either, because we can't contact these 3 groups of people at all, the secretary was sweating. The deputy minister rubbed his temples, thought for a moment, and suddenly showed a very relaxed smile. Very good. Ah, the secretary thought he had heard it wrong, or the deputy minister was crazy. Before, the deputy minister was as anxious as a lamb on a bonfire. Now the matter is getting bigger and bigger, and it has almost reached the point where it can't be covered up. The deputy minister said, "Very good." The deputy minister is not crazy. He calmed down and thought about it, but felt relieved. This matter is no longer a small internal conflict between the government and the Lur people. It has risen to the issue of war between the government and the IS country, and it also involves the 3 largest powers in the world. This is not something he, a deputy foreign minister, can manage. Let the headquarters and the president worry about the next thing. The deputy minister really has a keen political vision. That afternoon, the president held an emergency meeting with senior government officials. The matter can no longer be covered up. Related reports have appeared in the media of various countries, and real and speculative news are flying all over the sky. News broadcast, yesterday at 4 p.m. Iraq time, the Iraqi government forces and is launched a fierce exchange of fire in the Zagros Mountains. Is wiped out an Iraqi battalion with overwhelming superiority. According to news from reporters in Baghdad, a Chinese businessman is likely to be trapped in the La area of the war zone. The Chinese embassy has already started consultations and talks with the Iraqi government. CNN, facts have once again proved how stupid it is for the United States to send troops directly into Iraq. In the past decade, apart from the hatred of hundreds of millions of Muslims and countless terrorist attacks, what have we gained? Oil. God, at least half of Iraq's oil has been divided up by the Chinese and Russians, and even the European Union has taken a share of it. Our stupid government has been completely regarded as a pioneer. Yes, I agree with your point of view. So, before me, at least 3 American presidents should have been dragged out and shot. Oh, God, one time is not enough, they should be shot 3 times. Mr. Trump, as a Republican presidential candidate, do you have anything to say to the current American president? Of course, first, since we have withdrawn our troops from Iraq, we cannot send troops on a large scale again and fall into this quagmire. Second, if he can rescue those 2 poor American journalists, after I become president, I will consider admitting that he has made some contributions. Russian national television, the unchanging stereotyped face appeared on the screen, and behind him was a row of airborne troops ready to go. I don't know anything about Is or Liz. I only know that Miss Ludmila was once a soldier of the country. She protected my ex-wife, she paid taxes for the country, and she is also a very beautiful girl. So, boys of the 76th Airborne Division, I order you to rescue this girl and bring her back to her homeland. In the IS own TV station, a group of militants shouted crazily, "Come on, Americans, Russians, Iraqi government, your blood will dye the Zagros Mountains red, and the fire of Allah will burn all pagans to death." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 483. Chaos arose for a time, and the Moran mercenaries, Russian airborne troops, Iraqi government forces, Americans, and even some unpeacekeeping forces were mobilized by several seemingly occasional unexpected events. Get up and gather near the Zagros Mountains where the Lo people are. A large number of his armed forces have occupied the Zagros Mountains. According to satellite detection, is still increasing its troops towards the mountains. It was only then that the Iraqi government seemed to realize the strategic importance of the Zagros Mountains. It is the choke point between government forces, Kurdish rebels, and IS. Whichever party occupies the Zagros Mountains will have the initiative to attack the other 2 parties and cut off the channels for the other 2 parties to join forces. Moreover, the Zagros Mountains are a vast area with continuous mountains, making it easy to defend and difficult to attack. It is difficult to carry out precise targeted strikes and large-scale bombings. It is the best place for terrorist activities. A large number of Iraqi combat troops began to gather, preparing to launch an attack on the Zagros Mountains. The other 3 governments were unable to send large-scale troops into Iraq. After consultation, they dispatched their own soldiers from the peacekeeping forces. Under the leadership of Moran International, who was familiar with the local environment, they cooperated with the Iraqi ground troops to attack and launch search and rescue operations from the ground. In addition, at the Russian military airport closest to Iraq, 2 task forces of the Russian 76th Airborne Division were ready to go out, preparing to parachute into the mountainous area for rescue operations at the same time as the ground troops. Governments of various countries have taken actions one after another, but for the vast majority of ordinary people, they have not attracted much attention. In the Middle East, wars are reported on TV and in newspapers every day. As long as it doesn't hit you, who cares who lives and who dies? Especially the Chinese people, What kind of terrorist organizations, the Middle East, are too far away from the life of the Chinese people? It is no different from listening to 1001 Nights. Except for a very few people who are personally related. On Daowenyuk's Weibo, someone first noticed something was wrong. Soon, Weibo and the Yangchuan City Forum were all talking about it. Huh? A businessman named Su in Yangchuan City? Could it be the director of the garden? I'm so confused. Now I remember. Didn't the director say he was going to the Middle East to buy animals last time? I'm sure he didn't run away. He's probably the director. Oh my God, the principal was actually kidnapped by Middle Eastern terrorists. But, Lord God bless the principal for his safe return. Let's form a team to rescue the director, bring the animals from the zoo, and make a big fuss in Iraq. Speaking of which, I'm really worried about the director. Hostages kidnapped by terrorists are almost never successfully rescued. I'm really worried about seeing the director's head. Calm down, it seems like what was said on TV is that the person who kidnapped the principal was not a terrorist, but an Iraqi tribe. It's all the same, Middle Easterners are crazy. Give me 100,000 urban management. Let's pray for the director. Pray for blessings, small candles. Pray for blessings. Pray for blessings. Contrary to the speculation on the internet, the zoo has been officially notified that the person who was kidnapped was Su Ming, who is technically missing. This news was brought to the zoo by Wang Jianxi, accompanied by the Deputy Secretary of the Yangchuan Municipal Party Committee, and a brief meeting was held. Not only the employees of the zoo were present, but also the heads of several other companies under Su Ming. Even Wang Hao, who was far away in the capital, participated in the video conference. Even the family members of Nangong Yan, Zhaoqian, and Nangong Huang received the news and were invited to attend. However, due to Nangong Yan's strong insistence, Su Ming's mother was not notified for the time being. Comrades, Comrade Su Ming is an outstanding entrepreneur in our Yangchuan city, a representative of outstanding young people, and one of the best young members of our party. This time he went to the Middle East to buy animals for the purpose of animal protection. It is also for the economic development of Yangchuan city, so please rest assured that the country will do its best to rescue Comrade Su Ming. This sentence first set the tone for Su Ming's trip to the Middle East, and it was a positive behavior on behalf of Yangchuan city. If there is any good, it is sacrifice for the country. The Deputy Secretary of the Municipal Party Committee then said solemnly, the municipal government and the province will maintain communication with the upper levels at any time. Before coming, Comrade Secretary asked me to convey a message to everyone, that you must believe in the party. After the meeting, I will fly there directly capital, communicate with the higher UPS. After the brief meeting, Zhao Yun sent a video call directly from the Chinese embassy in Iraq. Don't worry, everyone. Nangong Huang and I are currently in the embassy and are very safe. Su Ming has a professional Russian bodyguard beside him. He did not fall into the hands of IS, but a pro-government tribe in Iraq. He will not be killed for the time being. There is too much danger. The Iraqi government forces, Russia, the United States, and our country's peacekeeping forces have begun to mobilize, so everyone can wait with peace of mind. After Zhao Yun finished explaining the situation, the Deputy Secretary gave a brief summary, then hurriedly left the zoo and boarded a plane to the capital. After the Secretary left, Zhao Yun tried his best to say in a more relaxed tone, everyone has their hearts in their hearts. Although Su Ming is young, he has always been calm in his work and never fights an unprepared battle. I believe he can be safe returning. Haha, let me tell you some good news. Due to Su Ming's disappearance, our government has gained a huge advantage in the negotiations with the Iraqi oil fields. When Su Ming comes back, he will still be a hero of the country. Woolen cloth. That's what he said, but no one in the office can relax. Su Ming has to come back. The government is now putting on such a big show, anyone with a little bit of brains can guess how serious the situation is. The three major countries in the world, and is, a terrorist country that is more ferocious than the base back then, this is simply a war. No matter how strong the individual's ability is, it is insignificant in the face of war. The atmosphere in the office is very depressing, and everyone is a little absent-minded. The zoo, entertainment company, reservoir, winery, including Shenyang's small computer technology company, were either founded by Su Ming or went from decline to glory in Su Ming's hands. In their hearts, unknowingly, Su Ming has become the backbone of all of them. Seeing that the days are getting better and better, suddenly, all of this may become a bubble, which makes everyone unable to accept this reality for a while. It's all my fault, it's all my fault. Sister Tong muttered to herself in a daze, and the others were also dejected. How about stopping all the activities at the zoo? Some old employees whispered. What about the live broadcast platform? Should we also suspend it for a while and wait for President Su to come back? Ask President Zhao what to do with the winery, said the representative of Dashan wine industry. But to everyone's surprise, at this time, the person who should be the most sad, and even cry loudly, showed amazing calmness. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 484. Su Ming is missing and is even facing the risk of being killed. Apart from Su's mother, who has not received any news yet, who should be the saddest? Of course, it should be his girlfriend, Nangong Yan. Even if Nangong Yan fainted on the spot, everyone thought it was normal. But at this moment, Nangong Yan, who usually loves to make trouble, gets jealous, and has a small temper, and sometimes acts like a little girl, did not shed a single tear. She stood up calmly. Dear colleagues of Su Ming, I have a few words to say. The eyes of the office were instantly focused on this young girl. Everyone knew her relationship with Su Ming. At this time, someone who was close to Su Ming was needed to take the lead and say something to stabilize people's hearts. Nangong Yan's eyes slowly swept across everyone's face. I believe that Su Ming must not want the business he founded to stagnate because of his short disappearance. So, please return to your job and continue your previous work according to the arrangements he made before leaving until he comes back. The big office became quiet, and everyone looked at each other. Nangong Yan and Su Ming were not married after all. When Su Ming was not around, she gave orders on his behalf, and everyone was a little uncomfortable for a while. Nangong is right. Shen Yan, you and the entertainment company should fully cooperate with Nangong and wait for Su Ming to come back. Su Ming's best friend, Wang Hao, was the first to speak on the other end of the video call. He was not only Su Ming's friend, but also had Wang Jianxi behind him. Shen Yan nodded. Nangong, you should worry more about the winery. Haha, it's actually not a big deal. Just run it normally. Before Su Ming left, he told me that you are a strong girl, and it's true. Zhao Yun, Su Ming's biggest social helper in his career, said with a smile. Sister-in-law, I will continue to be busy with the reservoir. If you want to check the accounts, they are all with the accountant. Liang Shi rubbed his head and said. Whoever dares not listen to my sister-in-law, I will kill him. The bald man sitting in the last row of the conference room said viciously, but no one paid attention to him. People from the zoo all looked at the retired Director Song. Director Song nodded silently, and seemed to be talking about something unrelated. In the ancient big families, there were old men with high seniority and capable young men, but only one person could be the master of the family, and that was the head of the family. But if one day, the head of the family was gone, and the new head of the family did not appear, who would be the head of the family? It was not old men like us, nor those young men. Only the wife of the first room could be the head of the family. Speaking of this, he looked at Nangong Yan, his eyes full of appreciation. Now you understand why Su Ming, such an excellent young man, chose Miss Nangong. With this responsibility and temperament, Su Ming did not make a mistake. Although she has not married Su Ming yet, everyone knows that this is a matter of time. If Su Ming is not here, who will you listen to if you don't listen to her? Old director, you are too kind. Nangongyan nodded slightly. Several major leaders and loyal ministers under Su Ming all expressed their support for Nangongyan. During the time when Su Ming was away, Nangong temporarily played the role of Su Ming. In fact, there was not much practical work for Nangong to do, but at this time, a spiritual leader must stand up and give everyone a reassurance. After the meeting, Nangongyan temporarily lived in the Tingfeng pavilion in the zoo. As soon as she walked into the pavilion and closed the door to be alone, Nangongyan sat on Su Ming's bed and couldn't hold back any longer. Tears came pouring out, buried in the pillow, shoulders shrugged, crying very sadly. Meow meow meow. Many cats sat by the bed, meowing, as if to comfort her. You must come back safely. Su Ming, the initiator of the incident, is now safe and sound. He is grilling fish. The bonfire in the wooden house was lit again. Su Ming and Ludmila, who was only wearing a tight vest, sat on both sides of the bonfire. On the bonfire, a fat and big fish was roasted with a fragrant aroma. As a reserve envoy of God, Su Ming's current treatment is very good. Except for being a little hot and having trouble with urination and defecation, he has almost everything he wants. The fish was delivered that night, weighing more than 3 pounds. Unfortunately, Emile, who went to catch the fish, did not realize the importance of live fish. After catching the fish and sending it to Su Ming, the fish was dead when it reached Su Ming's hands. So, Su Ming's plan to make an energy storage ball from the fish failed, and he could only use it for barbecue. Then he told Emile to catch another one, and this time it must be alive, and put it in a jar filled with water and bring it over. You can actually grill meat? It looks good. Ludmila sniffed, nodded with satisfaction, and then stood up and moved a few times on the spot. One of her long legs was lifted up 180 degrees, and pressed straight against the wall of the room to exercise. Su Ming looked at her with a depressed look, and then quickly looked away. The room was too hot, and Ludmila said several times that she was not afraid of being taken advantage of by Su Ming, and asked to take off her tight vest and large camouflage pants, and be shirtless like Su Ming, but Su Ming refused them all. In this environment and occasion, it was really not suitable to face a naked woman. In the end, Ludmila couldn't bear the heat anymore, so she took off her camouflage pants, and her 2 long legs, which were more than 1 meter long, were exposed to Su Ming without any protection. He didn't know whether she meant it or was just bored. She would wear a tight tank top and shorts and twist in front of Su Ming, either exercising or doing yoga. In short, they were all very exciting movements. Su Ming restrained his thoughts and did not look at her. He was grilling the fish. He thought that if he had a live fish and absorbed an energy storage ball that could extend the breathing time underwater, it wouldn't be a big problem to pass the ice spring test. Suddenly, several gunshots were heard from a distance, followed by loud gunshots, including the sound of exploding artillery shells. What's going on? Su Ming and Ludmila were shocked at the same time. The door curtain was suddenly opened, and Emile walked in from the outside with a gun in his hand, his face filled with smoke, followed closely by Ali. Through the gap in the door curtain, a group of fully armed Luer soldiers could be seen standing solemnly at the door. For some unknown reason, the evil is launched an attack on us in advance. Emile's face was completely black, and he wiped his face vigorously. Sir, Lul's brothers can still resist for a while, we will escort them. You and most of the tribe should leave here as soon as possible. What about the ice spring ceremony? Didn't it say it will be held in 3 days? Su Ming asked. It's too late. The Lo people have reached the most critical moment. We will escort you to the ice spring ceremony immediately, Ali said. What? Su Ming was shocked. Where's the fish? Where's my fish? Ali just wanted to vomit blood. Why did the god of fire choose such an apostle? How could he still want to eat it after all this time? Bring the fish and let's go together, Ali pointed to the grilled fish on the bonfire. No. I'm talking about live fish, Su Ming said angrily. It's too late, Emil, take the angel and leave. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 485. After leaving the cabin, Su Ming clearly realized how tense the situation had become. The lure settlement was almost surrounded. There were loud gunshots from all directions. In the darkness, fire snakes kept lighting up in the distant jungle. It was impossible to count how many enemies were lurking in the darkness. The settlement was in chaos. The lures ran out of their houses one after another, carrying the simplest food on their backs. Most of the young and middle-aged men carried guns, forming small teams and rushing outside the village to resist the attacks of outsiders. Basil, you lead everyone towards the place where the ceremony is held. Emil, you lead the boys to stop his pursuit, old Ali yelled at the top of his lungs. Thousands of lure people abandoned their homes and fled deep into the Zagros mountains in the dark. Why don't you break out? Su Ming asked Ali loudly as he followed the large army. Is has blocked the way out of the mountain. We can only retreat deep into the mountain. Lord God Envoy, after you pass the ice spring test, you will lead us, Ali said. Su Ming's heart sank into his stomach. He didn't have the energy storage ball to deal with water, so how could he pass the test? But there were people from Lure all around, and Basil, who was lying on the stretcher, had a group of soldiers following him closely, and he couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Even if you escape, the surrounding mountains and forests may be more dangerous. If you encounter his militants, you will be in big trouble. Probably because of the loud gunfire, Su Ming didn't find even a single animal while escaping into the mountains, and his plan to escape with the help of wild beasts also failed. Running wildly all the way, as they continued to go deeper into the mountains, the gunfire behind them finally gradually weakened. After a whole night, when the sky became slightly brighter, the lure team finally stopped at the foot of a steep cliff to rest temporarily. Looking at the past, most of the low people who followed here were old, weak, women and children. There were only 400 to 500 people at most. Most of the young and strong people followed Emil to the rear. Even though Su Ming's physique was better than that of ordinary people, he was exhausted from running all night and was out of breath. He sat on the same spot and didn't want to move a finger. Ludmila gasped for breath, picked up the kettle and started drinking it. The rest of the lure people didn't fare much better. Many of them sat down and then lay down directly on their backs. The high priest Ali didn't even bother to perform the ice spring ceremony, he was too tired to speak. Not long after, before Su Ming and the others had recovered their physical strength, lure young men carrying guns chased them sporadically, looking exhausted. Why are you here? Why don't you lead someone to stop his pursuit? Ali's face darkened. Go back and stop them. I will immediately perform the ice spring ceremony. After the ceremony is completed, the apostles will lead us out of here. You also need to do this. Cover. Father, hoo-hoo. Emil's throat seemed to have been burned by fire. His voice was hoarse and dry. He held the gun and gasped for air. He said intermittently, Is has occupied the village. Brothers, fight. More than 30 people died, and their attack was barely repelled. I guess they won't catch up within a day or two. Why? Ali asked curiously. According to the strength of it is impossible for the low people to stop them by losing only more than 30 people. Moreover, Is has always had a ruthless style. It has always carried out genocide against tribes who dare to resist. How could it be possible in this case? Given the advantage, give up the pursuit? Outside the mountain, there seems to be government troops attacking, holding back most of the Is forces, over there. Amir pointed to the direction of Is to the west. Is troops are still coming to support. I think the real purpose of is not to occupy us, but to occupy the mountainous area and fight a fierce battle with the government forces. Basil said, High Priest, Emil can be said to be the young man with the best military literacy among the Low people. He has a natural acumen for war. Even the American officers I know are not as good as him. I believe in his judgment. We should perform the ice spring ceremony immediately, there is no time to waste. Okay, Emil, you go and arrange the security work. Basil, summon the elders of the tribe to join me to witness the envoy passing the test of the ice spring ceremony. After talking for a long time, Su Ming finally spoke about himself. He turned around and looked around. There were mountains everywhere, not even streams or rivers. Where was the ice spring? Besides, on such a hot day, even if there is spring water, it cannot be frozen. Could it be that the so-called ice spring does not mean suffocating oneself with water? Is it just a religious reference, like pouring some cold water on one's forehead and that's it? 6 old people from Le who were as old as Ali, plus Lul, a total of 7 people, lined up in a row. Amir led 5 soldiers, half to protect and half to escort, and surrounded Su Ming and Ludmila. Please come with me. After Ali said, he walked away towards the cliff. Su Ming and Ludmila looked at each other and exchanged glances. In the past 2 days, there has been some tacit understanding between the two. If Su Ming feels that he cannot pass the test later, the two of them will violently attack at the same time, kidnap Ali or find a way to defeat Lul's soldiers, and escape. Following Ali to the bottom of the cliff, Su Ming discovered that there was indeed water here. There was a huge cave under the cliff, enough for 4 or 5 people to pass side by side, but the entrance was blocked by vines. If you don't get close, you can't find it at all. The gurgling water flows out of the cave, forming a shallow stream. The water is only ankle deep, which is definitely not enough to suffocate people. After following the stream into the big cave, Amir and the others lit torches. The interior space of the cave is not as huge as imagined. At most, it is less than 100 square meters in area, more than 2 meters but less than 3 meters high. A dozen people standing inside seem a bit crowded. In the deepest part of the cave, there is a pool of water with a radius of about 5 or 6 meters. The water flows out of the pool. Because there is no sunlight in the damp and cold cave all year round, the pool looks green and green. If you get a little closer, you will feel a chill. It can barely be considered an ice spring. From the color of the pool, you can see that the water is very deep. Ali turned around and saluted Su Ming with his hands on his chest. This is the closest thing we can find to the ice spring. Let's start the ceremony. When you pass the test of the ceremony, you will be the true messenger of our Lure people and all the fire god believers in the world. We will faithfully follow your footsteps and dedicate ourselves to you. Okay, don't be polite. How do I perform the ceremony? Should I jump in and hold my breath for a few minutes, or what should I do? Su Ming said, pretending to scratch his head, approaching Ali calmly, and at the same time, he sprinkled his mental power and probed into the water. Fortunately, there are fish in the water. Although they are only small fish the size of fry, they are still fish. Yes, you just need to submerge your whole body in the pool and survive for more than 10 minutes, and you will pass. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 486. Su Ming has never felt that there is an animal in the world that makes him feel so close to it. From his spiritual power perception, he can clearly perceive that there are fish in the pond. Although there are not many and not big, there are enough. As long as it is fish, he can collect energy storage balls. From the many experiments in the zoo before, he can basically determine that as long as it is not a very special fish, the ability provided by most fish can prolong the survival time underwater. He can hold his breath for more than a minute, plus the underwater survival time provided by the fish, 10 minutes should be no problem. Even if one energy storage ball doesn't work, there can be another one. Now his spiritual power is almost full, and there is an energy storage ball that can instantly replenish his spiritual power. In other words, he can use it twice in a row to survive underwater. If there is no other explanation, I'm going into the water, Su Ming said as he took off his clothes and only wore a pair of primitive-looking shorts, like a loincloth. That day, he was in the wooden house, and his pants were burned again. It was said that the most beautiful virgin among the Lure people had temporarily sewn them for him. Dear sir, we look forward to you passing the test, becoming a true messenger of God, and leading the Lure people to the light. The old man Ali suddenly knelt down tremblingly, facing Su Ming with a posture of prostrating himself. When he knelt like this, the other old men looked at each other in surprise. The etiquette of prostrating oneself can only be dedicated to God and God's messenger. This young man has not passed the test completely, which seems inappropriate, right? But since the high priest has already done this, what else can they do? So the 7 old men crouched in a circle around the pool, sticking their butts out, and chanting the traditional prayers of Zoroastrians. It sounded like a monk chanting to the dead. Su Ming pursed his lips. This is urging me to die. Emile and several soldiers held guns, and it was not convenient to kneel down, but they also subconsciously stepped back with a respectful look. Ludmila, watch the time, Su Ming nodded to the mother bear. Among this group of people, only this woman was clear-headed and trustworthy. Ludmila nodded, but her expression was not relaxed. Holding your breath underwater for 10 minutes? Even a professionally trained frogman can't do it. But if Su Ming doesn't go into the water, Ludmila can probably guess what will happen. This group of desperate Lure people have already regarded Su Ming as their last hope. They might tie him up and throw him into the water to hold his breath for 10 minutes. If he doesn't die, he is a messenger of God. If he dies, then it can only be Su Ming's bad luck. It can be seen from the first fire ritual that they can really do such a thing. Be careful. Before Ludmila could finish her words, Su Ming had already jumped into the pool. Around the pool, Ali and the old men crouched lower, shouting prayers at the top of their lungs, and their voices became louder and louder, almost blowing their lungs out. After Su Ming entered the water, he immediately felt a cool breeze around him. The water was much deeper than it looked. Soon, he was completely submerged in the water. He couldn't reach the bottom and was always sinking slowly. The water temperature also changed from cool to cold. A chill came from his feet and spread rapidly to his body. It was pitch black in the water. Even with his eyes open, he couldn't see the surroundings clearly. However, Su Ming didn't have to worry about it. He spread his mental power and found a small silver fish, and used his soul-attaching ability. The small fish had no vision in the water, but it could sense the surrounding environment from other organs. Unexpectedly, the space under the pool was much larger than it looked on the surface. It was like an inverted big-bellied gourd, surrounded by rugged rocks, and the deepest was nearly 10 meters. There were many large and small holes on the bottom of the water and the surrounding rocks. Some were large enough for 2 people to get in, and some were small enough that even a fist couldn't fit in. They were probably connected to underground waters or other places. Su Ming was about to use his mental power to control the fish to approach him so that he could absorb the energy storage ball. Unexpectedly, the flatfish suddenly swooped into a cave with a diameter of about half a meter and swam away quickly. In a moment, when Su Ming continued to lock the fish with his mental power, he found that the fish had already jumped out of the cave for more than 10 meters and was still swimming forward quickly. It seems that this cave is very big. Su Ming's curiosity suddenly aroused. He stretched his head into the water, used his hands and feet, and lay down at the entrance of the cave, calling the fish back at the same time. The cave was dark and invisible to the eye. At this time, it seemed even more bottomless. He could feel that there was a stream of water slowly flowing out of the cave. If he was not wrong, it must lead to other places. Su-Ming estimated that it was still early and he had not yet suffocated his breath, so he bravely kicked his feet in the water and got into the dark cave. If someone else came, they might consider whether there would be any ferocious underwater creatures in the cave, but Su-Ming did not need to consider this issue, and even hoped to find some strange things. With spiritual power, even if an evil dragon appeared, he dared to fight. The little fish reappeared in front of him, and Su-Ming gently let it stay on his wrist, let the giant clam beads condense into an energy storage ball, and then broke it. It seemed that there was an invisible air cover on the surface of the body, and the slightly stuffy feeling disappeared immediately. There was still plenty of time. Su-Ming let go of the little fish, let it swim to the depths of the cave on its own, and he followed behind slowly. After swimming a few meters, several forks appeared in front of him. The little fish drilled a hole in a familiar way, and Su-Ming followed. 2 minutes later, Su-Ming found that the underwater caves were actually crisscrossed, forming underwater passages, like a small underwater maze, and there would be a fork from time to time. He kept an eye out to prevent himself from losing his way back. He found a piece of broken stone and marked the position at each fork. Strangely enough, the deeper he swam, the temperature of the surrounding water actually rose. After another 2 minutes, the water in the pool was like the hot springs in the back mountain of the zoo, and it was a little hot. The little fish probably couldn't stand such a high water temperature, so he ended his play, flicked his tail and turned away. Su-Ming floated in the water. In front of him, there was a gap on the ground under the water. Boiling groundwater kept coming out of the gap. It turned out to be a small geothermal spring under the water. Even 2 or 3 meters away, the water flow could be felt to be hot. It was estimated that the water coming out of the spring mouth was as hot as boiling water. Iraq is rich in various underground energy sources, and geothermal springs are not a rare sight. Su-Ming was about to turn around and leave when he suddenly discovered from his mental power that there were a large number of animals around the spring of the geothermal spring. Strange, what kind of animal can survive in the boiling hot spring mouth? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 487. Around the hot springs, there are a large number of creatures that are difficult to see with the naked eye. The small ones may be only a few microns, and the large ones are only 1 or 2 millimeters. In the boiling hot springs, they don't feel anything and live happily. Huh, Su-Ming was stunned. He actually met a water bear. No wonder it can survive in a boiling hot spring. The water bear is a small creature that is almost mythical. If the earth is destroyed and only one animal can survive, it is definitely the water bear. It is the most powerful creature known on earth. This little thing that looks like a silkworm pupa can be traced back to the Cambrian period 500 million years ago. After a long evolution, its body has become extremely small, with 8 round and fat legs, and a layer of water film all over its body. Under a microscope, you can see them crawling forward in a naive manner. Water bears are distributed almost everywhere in the world. They have been found in the highest peaks of the Himalayas, boiling hot springs, and below 4,000 meters in the deep sea. It can survive in all kinds of harsh conditions, such as in the vacuum of outer space, in strong acids and alkalis, and even in nuclear reactors with radiation horrors. It can play happily. It is almost an immortal guy. There was a study that soaked a group of water bears in liquid nitrogen at -253 degrees for 26 hours, and another group of water bears was boiled in boiling water for an hour. After taking them out, the 2 groups of water bears were resurrected with full blood on the spot as if nothing had happened. Yes, this guy can be resurrected, full of blood. An unexpected harvest. If it weren't in the water, Su Ming would have laughed out loud. Although these little guys are widely distributed, they are by no means readily available everywhere. Because of their strong adaptability, they don't have a fixed habitat. Theoretically, they can be encountered anywhere, but if you look for them specifically, you may not be able to find them even if you travel half the world for 3 to 5 years if you are unlucky. Conquering the universe depends on you. Su Ming didn't even think about it. He broke the energy storage ball that stored his mental power at the last moment, replenished his whole body's mental power, and then controlled a small water bear. The stronger the body, the less brains are needed. Water bears are a typical example. It takes almost no mental effort to control water bears, so it feels as easy as facing single-celled animals. A trace of mental effort is released, and a large group of water bears swim to Su Ming along the water flow. Just as he was about to take these water bears back, the bottom of the water suddenly vibrated slightly, and the cave seemed to shake. What's going on again? With the water bears by his side, Su Ming became much bolder. His physical mental strength was enough to condense an energy storage ball. It was completely predictable that the energy storage ball obtained from the water bear must be a good thing that can greatly enhance vitality, and he was not afraid of danger. So, he continued to swim forward with courage, bypassing the boiling geothermal springs and approaching the source of the vibration. At one end of the pool, Ali and a group of old men had shouted hoarsely. Ludmila nervously looked at the time on the tactical watch. 9.5 minutes had passed, but Su Ming had not emerged from the water. Ludmila strode to the edge of the pond. The visibility of the emerald water was extremely poor, and it was impossible to see if there was anyone below. However, the water was as calm as a mirror, without even a ripple or a bubble. Ali, something seems to be wrong, Ludmila said nervously, looking back. Ali led several other old men, raised their heads, and stared at the water without saying a word. They were more nervous than Ludmila at this moment. Time passed by second, and for everyone present, every second was torture. If Su Ming did not appear after 10 minutes, for Ludmila, it meant that the protection mission that she risked her life to complete this time would be a complete failure. For Ali and the entire Lu'er tribe, it meant that all their previous judgments were wrong. This young man from the east was not the messenger of the god of fire at all. The god of fire had completely abandoned them at the critical moment of the Lu'er people's life and death. Silence, deathly silence. It seemed that even breathing in the cave was stagnant. Only the sound of gurgling water could be heard. More than a dozen pairs of eyes were staring at the surface of the pool, as if some monster in the water would suddenly emerge. Emil's hands holding the steel gun were shaking slightly. Although the cave was cold and cool, the young soldier still couldn't help sweating. The sweat on his palms had soaked through the linen bandage on the gun handle. Basil was lying on a stretcher, holding a pocket watch in his hand. Tick-tick, tick-tick, every second the pocket watch went, the slight sound was like thunder in everyone's ears. Basil's voice was hoarse and he began to tell the time, 20 seconds left. The water surface was still calm as usual. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. As the last 3 seconds counted down, everyone's heart was in their throats. They wanted to dig out their eyeballs and put them in the water to see, and even subconsciously held their breath. Ludmila simply lay down by the pool. 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1. Basil's voice became slower and slower, and he was even reluctant to finish the last second, as if this could delay time and make the 10-minute deadline come a little later. However, the only thing that is eternal and unchanging in the world is time. Even the true God cannot change the flow of time. 10 minutes passed, and every second that followed was to extend the time. And the pond was always quiet. The old men, all with ashen faces, slumped on the ground. Ali's dry lips murmured, and he muttered to himself absent-mindedly, "Great God, you really abandoned us." The whole place was waiting, and another 5 minutes passed. Ludmila gritted her teeth, jumped into the pool, took a deep breath, and dived into the water to salvage Su Ming's body. More than 10 minutes later, Ludmila emerged from the water again, with a face full of disappointment, and did not find Su Ming. At this moment, the water surface suddenly splashed, and a watery head appeared next to Ludmila's face, and the two faces almost came together. "Why did you come down?" Su Ming wiped the water drops on his face, staring at Ludmila, who was just a few feet away, with a puzzled look on his face. Ludmila stared at Su Ming's face with her eyes wide open for several seconds, and suddenly hugged Su Ming's neck and kissed him fiercely. "Woo woo woo, oh my god, you bitch, let go, help, woo woo, tongue, woo woo." Ludmila held Su Ming in her arms and kissed him forcefully, just like grabbing a chicken. It was unknown whether she was trying to vent her anger or for some other reason, but the kiss was so intense that even her arms around Su Ming's waist burst out with great strength, almost breaking Su Ming's waist. Su Ming was helplessly waving his hands and feet in the water. The lure people on the shore were completely stunned, staring at their god's messenger who was about to be suffocated to death by the mother bear's kiss. In total, Su Ming stayed in the water for nearly 30 minutes, not the 10 minutes he had said before. If this is not a miracle, what else can be called a miracle? A few seconds later, there was a frenzy of cheers in the cave, and all the lure people, including several armed soldiers, prostrate themselves on the ground, crawled around the pool, and shouted at the pool. "Messenger of the god of fire, young man from the east, please guide the lure people in the direction of advancement." Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 488. After successfully passing the two tests, Su Ming was promoted from reserve service to a full-time member and became a Vulcan apostle with a background, and organization. Ali tremblingly fell at Su Ming's feet, and chanted loudly with several other old men. What it was about, according to Ludmila's translation, was a blessing from the Holy Scriptures praising the God of fire and his messengers. Emil hurried out of the cave and told the good news to the tribesmen waiting outside the cave. If the 10-minute underwater test was a little short, it was not enough to convince everyone, but Su Ming stayed in the water for a full 30 minutes, half an hour, which was enough to shock everyone. "Oh, I understand. If this is placed in the east, it means they are chanting Amitabha to me. In the west, it means God's blessing." Su Ming wiped his mouth, and there was a strong feminine smell on his mouth. Ludmila smiled and said, "That's probably what it means. How on earth did you hold it underwater for almost half an hour? Without diving equipment, it is impossible for humans to do it." Su Ming leaned close to her ear in a low voice and said with a smile, "Let me tell you, there is a rock at the bottom of the water, more than 30 centimeters from the water surface. I exposed my head below to take a breath." "What a coincidence," Ludmila asked doubtfully. "Perhaps this is the arrangement of the god of fire." Su Ming, who now also knew how to use the magic stick, said nervously, then picked up the water bottle filled with royal jelly left on the shore and took a sip. In the water just now, his mental energy was completely exhausted in the end, so he had to replenish it. He put on another robe. A group of water bears that were almost invisible to the naked eye were now lying obediently by the water. Su Ming carefully picked up the water and secretly hid the water bears in the fibers of his clothes. In the gap outside the cave, cheers like a mountain roar and a tsunami suddenly sounded. Thousands of love people roared at the same time. Ali smiled with a smile on his face, half bowed his body, almost facing Su Ming with the back of his head, and said, "Great God's envoy, please go outside and accept the worship of the most pious love people." "Ali, can you straighten your waist?" Su Ming was not used to others talking to him like this. Not only Ali, but also a group of old men in the cave were all in the same posture, which looked more uncomfortable than kneeling. "Oh no, mortals are not allowed to look directly at God and his messengers," Ali said. If you are like this, don't call me a god envoy again. After experiencing 2 life and death tests, Su Ming is now completely relieved about his identity as a god envoy. At least in the eyes of the Lure people, this identity is completely settled and there won't be any changes. In this case, it is completely possible to use some commanding tone towards Alayi, which can be regarded as revenge for the anger suffered before. Master God Envoy. Alayi finally managed to stand up straight, half-bowed, and followed Su Ming. Under the protection of 2 gun-wielding soldiers, Su Ming took the lead to walk out of the cave, followed by Alayi and 6 old men. Under the cliff, hundreds of torches were swaying vigorously. Wherever Su Ming passed, the Lo people on both sides were prostrate on the ground, loudly singing the glory of God. Now all the glory belongs to Su Ming. Passing through the crowd and returning to the high ground at the entrance of the cave, all the people of Lure gave out cheers like a mountain roar and a tsunami to welcome the Apostle of God. Lord Envoy of God, from now on, all the people of La are your most loyal servants. Following your footsteps, please point the way for our future. Allah, first of all, since you admit that I am the messenger of God, in the future, when there are outsiders, you can call me Mr. Su, or the boss, but don't call me the messenger of God anymore. You have to know that there are many religious beliefs in the world. Calling me this way will cause me a lot of trouble. As you wish, great envoy of God. Of course, there are no outsiders here. I will change my words in front of outsiders. Alayi has now become like an obedient kitten, and Su Ming will do whatever he says. Not even talking back. Second, the future direction of the Lo people. Su Ming touched his chin and looked at the surrounding sky for a while, as if he was observing the stars at night, and then pointed to the east. Go around this mountain and walk towards the opposite side of the mountain. Yes, the envoy. But, can I ask why? When you were going through the test, I heard fierce cannons and gunshots coming from the other side of the mountain. It seemed that a fierce battle was going on. Alayi no explanation. Yes, just as I emerged from ice and fire, the rebirth of the Lure people also needs to pass the test of iron and fire. Su Ming became more and more like a magic stick. Thousands of Lo people picked up their weapons and followed Su Ming's footsteps, starting to go around the cliff and heading towards the other side of the mountain. Su Ming was not just pointing randomly, nor was he asking the people of Lure to die. Something else was happening on the other side of the mountain. Time goes back half an hour. Su Ming was in the water. After feeling the vibration of the earth, he decisively swam in the direction of the vibration. Along the way, there were constant vibrations from the bottom of the water, as if something huge was exploding on the ground. After swimming for more than 5 minutes, Su Ming felt a sense of tightness in his chest, and the aura of mental energy outside his body quickly faded away. He knew that Xiao's underwater survival time with the energy storage ball was coming to an end. So he broke the water bear's energy storage ball without hesitation. Sure enough, it blew up. In an instant, the effect of the tardigrade energy storage ball spread all over Su Ming's body. The elephant's energy storage ball makes people feel powerful, the horse racing's energy storage ball makes people feel that there is an endless momentum, the fish's energy storage ball in the water makes people feel similar to moving on the shore. But the water bear's energy storage ball has a feeling that is hard to describe. For a moment, it seems that it is completely disconnected from this world and is not subject to the constraints of natural laws. In the water, you can breathe, you are not afraid of being burned in the fire, and even if you eat arsenic as food, you will not be poisoned to death. If you have to describe it, this feeling is similar to the emptiness after being invincible. Fortunately, Su Ming is very clear that this is mostly an illusion. Like other energy storage balls, the water bear energy storage ball is just a pirated water bear's ability. It is impossible to make yourself as perverted as a water bear. If you really boil it in boiling water for 10 minutes and roast it in the fire for half an hour, you will still be exhausted. However, for the time being, you don't have to worry about the problem of oxygen. You also know whether it is because your body's demand for oxygen has decreased, or your skin can really breathe weakly in the water. Anyway, you don't have to worry about suffocating. Continue swimming along the waterway, and soon, a bright spot appears in the dark waterway ahead. An exit. Su-ming swam over with his hands and feet, and found a hole with a diameter of about 20 centimeters above his head, which was just enough to raise his head. He carefully laid his face flat on the water, and his eyes rolled around, and found that there was also a cave above. He slowly emerged half of his head, and saw two armed men wearing robes walking back and forth outside the cave more than 10 meters away, and they did not notice anything unusual in the cave. In the other direction, a black man and a white man, tied up like dumplings, were curled up in the corner of the cave, looking at him in surprise. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 489. Seeing these two guys who were beaten like dumplings, Su-ming's heart skipped a beat at first, and he was startled. Because it was dark inside the cave, he suddenly turned around and saw two people looking at him, just like seeing a ghost in a horror game. Anyone would be scared. But then he realized that these two unlucky guys were probably hostages. This didn't need to be guessed from a god's perspective. The cave in the Middle East mountainous area, the masked militants, and the tied-up Westerners, these factors combined, anyone who is not a fool can guess it. He quickly turned back and took another look at the cave entrance. The cave entrance was far away from his current position. The attention of the two masked militants was focused on the outside of the cave. If someone came to rescue the hostages, they must have come from outside. They never thought that a head would grow out of the spring mouth used to draw water in the cave. But the spring mouth was too small, and it was only enough for Su-ming's head to grow out, and the whole person couldn't get out. After the initial shock, the black and white hostages whispered help to Su-ming, their eyes full of pleading. Su-ming had passed the Set-4 exam, so he could not understand the whole English sentence, but he could understand short foreign language sentences like help and yamiadi. Although he did not know the specific identities of the kidnappers and the hostages, in this case, he did not need to think too much about which side to help. Would a good person do such an act as kidnapping? Moreover, according to what Su-ming had seen and heard in Iraq in the past few days, although the Iraqi army would wear national costumes, they would never cover their faces. Su-ming pointed his mouth towards the outside of the cave, and then asked the two hostages in a low voice with his mouth. The two hostages nodded, and the black woman shook her thick lips and said help. Please. The male reporter said a few words in a hurry in English. Seeing that Su-ming looked confused and did not understand at all, he quickly said a few short words. Su-ming understood this time. America, reporter, is. American reporter kidnapped by is. Su-ming wanted to help these two people, but the reality did not allow it. The spring was so small that he could not get out. Similarly, these two foreigners who were taller than him could not get in from the spring, even if they could get into the spring. If Su-ming had not got the direction wrong, his current position and the pool where he went into the water were separated by almost half a mountain. Although the straight line distance was not far, it was impossible for the two of them to hold their breath for almost 10 minutes and dive out of the water to return to the other side of the pool. If his mental power was full, Su-ming could also try to summon the animals in the mountain. If there were a few beasts or poisonous snakes, he should be able to kill the two guards unknowingly. In order to use the energy storage ball of the water bear, his mental power had reached the bottom, which was not enough for a large-scale search of the mountain. His current situation was a bit like a whack-a-mole game. Su-ming himself was the big mole that popped out of the ground, carefully observing the movements of the guards at the door, thinking about how to save the two foreigners. Before he could come up with a solution, fierce gunfire suddenly sounded outside the cave. Many people were shouting loudly in Arabic. The roar of the engine of a plane flying overhead could be heard faintly. It seemed that there were more than just these two guards. There were also a large group of armed elements outside the cave. Another group of guards came over. Several of them chattered loudly in Arabic for a while, and then walked into the cave. "Hold on. I will back," Su Ming said something in Chinglish to the two hostages, then shrank his neck and returned to the water. Facing so many terrorists, he had no choice. If he exposed his head outside, he would only become a mole and be beaten. Moreover, the oxygen provided by the tardigrade energy storage ball was not much. If he delayed any further, it was hard to say whether he could return to the starting point. When these came in, Su Ming had already retracted his head from the hole and lurked back to the original path. They did not find anything unusual, walked up to the two hostages, and without saying a word, as if to vent, he hit the two men headlessly with the butt of the gun, and then yelled viciously, *U0026 at hashtag. After that, he found a white man and kicked him a few times, and then he turned around and chatted with other companions as if he had vented his anger. The white reporter was beaten with blood all over his head and face. After listening to the other party's words with his ears erect, he said to the black man in a very excited voice, "Oh, God bless. A reconnaissance plane flew over, and it is very likely that an airborne force will come to rescue us. Nikki, we are saved." Airborne troops, could it be that Oriental man just now? The black Nikki was slightly stunned. Why did the airborne troops come out from the ground? No, I heard that it seemed to be a Russian plane, not an Oriental. What exactly does that Oriental do? The white reporter was also very confused. The Oriental guy just now didn't look like a soldier. He emerged from the ground without any reason. After he emerged, he couldn't even speak English. He looked like a tourist. He popped his head out, said a few words that no one could understand, and then turned around and ran away. It was really puzzling. Could it be that he was not a human at all, but just some kind of human-like aquatic creature? Or did they have hallucinations because they had been detained for a long time? In any case, we are saved, the white reporter said with a grin. The black Nikki was not as optimistic as him. The delicate thoughts unique to women made her feel that something was wrong. After being captured and escorted to the mountainous area, she saw a large number of his soldiers moving towards the mountainous area, enough to fight a small-scale local war. If it was just to guard two hostages, there was no need to mobilize so many soldiers. Before entering the mountainous area, she seemed to see two important figures in the top 10 of his in the picture that flashed by in the car window, also heading towards the mountainous area. A large number of troops, with important is figures sitting in person. If it was only used to guard hostages and extort ransom, this lineup would be too extravagant. The other party didn't even take her mobile phone at first, and only destroyed their mobile phones after entering the mountain as if they remembered. Although they were tied up and couldn't communicate with the outside world, the mobile phone had a positioning function, and the US government could find their approximate location through GPS. With several doubts added up, as an insider, Nikki seemed to smell a strong smell of conspiracy. Everything was not as simple as they thought, and it seemed to be more than just a hostage kidnapping and rescue incident. "You mean, is deliberately used us as bait?" Tom, a white man, said in surprise. "I hope I'm just being suspicious," Nikki said. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 490. Gunfire roars. In the mountains, a group of lures were heading towards the other side of the mountain. Su Ming alone could not rescue two hostages, but a whole tribe of lures and hundreds of armed young men were more than enough to rescue the hostages. However, even halfway across the mountain, the roar of artillery fire could be heard in the distance. Even Su Ming was a little confused. How many people were there on the other side? It's just a matter of kidnapping 2 hostages. How could it be necessary to send out so many troops? In line with the principle of safety first and efficiency first, Su Ming finally made a prudent decision. Most of the old, weak, women and children of the Lo people, escorted by some young adults, continued to march towards the mountains for the time being to avoid the war. Mir gathered about 2 platoons of elite La soldiers and followed Su Ming to rescue people. Emil, you must protect the safety of the divine envoy. If anything happens to the divine envoy, you don't have to come back. Use the fierce flames to wash away your sins. Before leaving, the high priest Allah said to his son, Father, God of fire is above. If the envoy of God needs to face the bullet, there is only one possibility. I will have died in front of him, Emil said. The lofty words between father and son did not arouse Su Ming's excitement at all. He just wanted to kick them both. Can he die before he even sets out? Since Ali was too old, Su Ming just kicked Emil in the end. Basil finally got what he wanted and kissed Su Ming's shoes, making his feet covered in saliva, which was quite disgusting. The young men from Lure in a company all had military service experience. When they learned that they were fighting for their god, the young men were all very high-spirited. They were completely different from when they were working for the Iraqi government forces. The closer we get to our destination, the more intense the sound of fighting coming from the front becomes, echoing constantly in the mountains. Emil personally protected Su Ming and asked with some confusion, Mr. Envoy, why do we have to save 2 Westerners who have nothing to do with us? Are you going to disobey God's will? Ludmila glared at him fiercely. In the past 2 days, Ludmila had been feeling quite uncomfortable. Now that Su Ming had become a genuine divine envoy, she finally felt proud, using the tiger skin as a banner and enjoying the treatment of a divine envoy's follower. Of course not. Emil glanced at Su Ming cautiously and said, the Holy Scriptures teach us that we must confess our hearts to God. Okay Emil, you have served as a soldier in the government. You should know that 2 Westerners will help the Lo people win the favor of the world. At least choose one between Westerners and is. I choose the West, Su Ming said. He said while taking another big mouthful of royal jelly. Getting closer and closer to the place where the hostages were kidnapped, Su Ming's mental power spread overwhelmingly, and animals of all sizes on half of the mountain were mobilized to become his informants. After climbing over the last hill, I finally saw the situation diagonally opposite through the telescope. At least half a regiment of his militants had set up defense fortifications on the hillside, which were still within visible range. There were even more unknowns of how many people were lurking in the surrounding mountains and forests. Oh, there are too many people on the other side. Damn it, they even have heavy artillery. Ludmila put down the telescope and said to Su Ming with a serious expression, we'd better go back. This is a war. Just dozens of La soldiers will not help at all. We can't even break through the opponent's outer defense line. As soon as it shows up, it will be sieved. Wait a minute. Su Ming waved his hand non-committally, and drank another large mouthful of honey. He didn't understand war, but that didn't mean he couldn't win the war. Meanwhile, the Iraqi Ministry of Defense's Operations Hall. On the large screen of the platoon, dozens of screens were playing the battle situation at the same time. A group of Iraqi military civilians were busy converting various information coming from the front into audio and video files, and sending real-time battle situation reports to them. Go to the senior officials of the bureau present. General, so far, the 2 mountain regiments have been severely depleted and have withdrawn from the battle. Together with the battalion that was initially wiped out, we have lost almost 4 battalions. Mr. Minister hopes. What do you hope for? Asked an Iraqi major general in charge of the battle. The Iraqi major in charge of the report looked at the officials from the United Nations Observer Mission and said with some lack of confidence, I hope we can temporarily cease fire. If this continues, the losses of the government forces will be too great. Obviously, This is a trap of the other side, waiting for us. Send troops to die. Of course I know it's a trap. The Major General was very angry. At this point in the war, the situation was very clear. The whole thing was a big conspiracy of Is initially threatened the Lur people to surrender. The real purpose was not to annex the thousands of Lur people, but to paralyze the Iraqi government forces and the Kurds in the north and conceal their true strategic intentions. If the government forces had taken tough measures at that time, sent troops to protect the Lur people, or even directly occupied the mountainous area, then nothing would have happened later. However, government forces and the Kurds are wary of each other. If either party rashly enters the mountainous area, it will cause the other party to take action. Neither side took the Lur people, who numbered only a few thousand, seriously. Instead, they gave Is a chance. Is continued to send troops into the mountains under the guise of annexing the Lur people. By the time the government forces and the Kurds came to their senses and understood Is' true intentions, they had already lost their fighter planes. Is had already deployed defenses in the mountains and was ready. No matter who took the initiative to attack, they would have to pay a heavy price. With a little trick, Is took advantage of the mutual defense mentality between the government forces and the Kurds, as well as the government's indifferent attitude towards small tribes like the Lul. Is easily occupied the geographical hub between the three parties. As for those hostages, they were purely accidental incidents involved in this big conspiracy. But it was those unexpected events that put the Iraqi government forces in a difficult position and had to send troops to rescue them. In particular, the two American hostages who had been clearly kidnapped and whose locations could even be determined were simply two baits, tempting the Iraqi government forces to send batches of troops to die. The American people will not allow their government to ignore the safety of their hostages. It is impossible for the US government to send troops on a large scale and get stuck in the quagmire of Iraq. Therefore, the dirty work of rescuing people can only be done by the Iraqi government forces. Who can let them be the loyal dogs of the US government? As for the Kurds, they are not the ruling party, so of course they can just sit back and watch. Lack of heavy weapons, lack of air force, relying on second-rate ground troops with second-rate armament and technical and tactical levels, to attack mountainous areas where defenses have been arranged, the price paid is too high, and even the government forces cannot bear it. In Iraq, only those with guns are the best. The casualties suffered by the government forces are too high. In the end, the Kurds will only take advantage of it and even replace the current government. The Major General turned to the United Nations observer team and asked what they meant.